In Game 1, Canada started the game with an early goal scored just 30 seconds in by Esposito. Canadians mentioned after this early goal they felt they were going to win by at least 10. 6 minutes after the Esposito goal, Canada scored another goal by Henderson. The USSR ended up striking back, which was unexpected by the Canadians. Zeman and Petrok both scored for the Soviets, resulting in a tie at 2-2. In the second period, the Soviets scored twice by Kharlamov. The Soviets were up 4-2. Cornier for the Canadians mentioned he couldn't believe the strength and conditioning of the Soviets. 8 minutes in the third period, Clark scored for the Canadians, making the score 4-3. Canadians felt a sense of hope. Canada couldn't solve the Soviets' goalie Tretiak. The Soviets were patient and defensively sound. Mikhailov and Zeman scored 57 seconds apart to put the game out of reach. At the end of the period, Yakushev scored another, cementing the Soviets' win. The final was 7-3 in favor of the Soviets. They were a group of amateurs who trained all year together. They won the game off their conditioning and team chemistry. In Game 2, Canada needed to regain confidence. Yet again, the Soviet goalie Tretiak stood on his head in the first period. Canada couldn't score. Phil Esposito, the leader of Team Canada, scored 7 minutes into the period. The third period, Cornier scored on the power play to get Canada's second goal. Yakushev scored for the Soviets shortly after to bring his team within one. Pete Mahovich scored a short-handed goal on a remarkable play. It has been referred to as the Mahovich miracle goal. A few minutes after Pete's goal, his older brother Frank had scored. This resulted in Canada having a 4-1 victory. The Canadians were more physical and they played a more defensive style. They were more respectful of us in the second game, said the Soviet captain. They understood we could play good hockey. They played very well, a very physical game. We had not seen such a style of game.
Canada started off Game 3 strong, scoring less than 2 minutes into the game. But the Soviets weren't far behind, scoring a little over a minute after. Canada scored at the end of the period to end it off 2-1. Canada played a good first period, playing a strong physical game, and had momentum going into the second. In the second period, Canada scored first. The Soviets would score later after that, to make it 4-2. The Soviets' Kidline scored 2 more goals, making it 4-4. It seemed Canada couldn't keep up to the Soviets' fast-paced hockey at the end of the second. The third period had no goals, ending the game in a tie, 4-4. The fourth game didn't start out well for Canada. The Soviet team scored 2 power play goals in the first and Canada had none, ending the first 2-0 for the Soviets. Canada scored first in the second, but the Soviets were unrelenting and scored 2 more quickly after, making the score 4-1. The Canadian team wouldn't give up in the third, coming out strong, getting 23 shots on net, but it wasn't good enough, ending the game in a 5-3 loss. Canada was embarrassed again by the Soviets in front of the hometown fans. The fans were not happy, booing Canada off the ice after the loss, showing no remorse. Esposito made a speech after the game, calling out the fans for their lack of support for the team.
I am completely disappointed. I cannot believe it. Some of our guys are really, really down in the dumps. We know we're trying. What the hell? I mean, we're doing the best we can, and they got a good team. And let's face facts. But it doesn't mean that we're not giving it our 150%, because we certainly are.
September 22nd, 2 weeks after being booed off the ice in Vancouver, Canada, Team Canada arrived in Moscow for the final 4 games at the Luzhniki Ice Palace, accompanied by 3,000 Canadian fans. Team Canada had to adjust to the different system rinks, which were wider ice surfaces and fish netting draped at the end of the rink above the boards instead of glass. Game 5 began. In the game, Perez scored the only goal of the first period, and Clark and Henderson scored in the second to give Canada a 3-0 lead in the third period. Blinov scored for the Soviets at 3:34 and Henderson scored at 4:56 to restore Canada's lead, although Anderson scored in deflection at 9:05 to start a run of 4 straight goals by the Soviets, and went on to beat Canada 5-4. Following the game, Bobby Clark stated, "We're not a defensive club, yet we tried to play defensively." Team Canada was now faced with the daunting task of having to win all 3 remaining games to win the series. September 24th, Game 6 began. Canada was getting used to the Soviet style of play, which was unlike anything in the NHL. Canadians changed strategies, getting away from the straight-line tactics that were common in the NHL and pushing the tempo with head-man passes and crisscrosses to take advantage of the Soviets' biggest weakness, which was their play in their own zone. For the first time, the Soviets opened the door a crack and the Team Canada rushed through like a freight train. The Soviets scored the first goal at 1:12 in the second period, but the Canadians' confidence did not budge. The Canadians caught the Soviets in a lapse and scored 3 goals in 1.5 minutes to span the 3-1 lead, eventually winning 3-2. Mostly these games had clearly gone beyond sport for Team Canada and become unrestricted war on it.
Tied 2-2 after the first period of Game 7 and no goals in the second, the two teams found themselves in an incredibly physical and competitive game. There were 18 penalties dealt out in total, with 4 given to Mikhailov from the Soviets alone. After a goal apiece in the third, each team was looking for someone to step up and be the hero for the game. Paul Henderson was that hero as he scored the go-ahead goal with just over 2 minutes left. This evened the series at 3 games apiece, with one tie setting up a Game 8 to decide the series once and for all. Again, after the first period, the clubs found themselves tied at 2 apiece during a very heated battle that saw 8 penalties handed out just over the single period, with 5 given to Canada and 3 given to the USSR. The second period brought fear to the Canadians as they watched the USSR take a lead, outscoring the Canadians 3-1. However, in the third period, the defense turned up as Canada only allowed 5 shots on net, and Ken Dryden was able to keep the Soviets scoreless in the frame. Canada went on to score 3 goals in that period, with Paul Henderson coming up big yet again and scoring the go-ahead goal with 34 seconds left in the game. This series changed the way hockey was played in many ways. The idea of year-round conditioning had never been thought of until they saw just how much more efficient the Russians were during the Summit Series. The actual style of play has changed since the series as well. The NHL was primarily a straight-lane skate league of dump-and-chase players, while the Russians played a pass-heavy game that waited for the right moment to strike. In addition, the physicality of the sport has changed. The Canadian players were all rough players, ready to lay someone out at any time, while the Russians would much rather skate around somebody than through them. The league has changed in the same way, where skill is just as valued as physical presence. The best players in the league today are all skill-based players who rarely throw the body when not needed.